Welcome to our Rainbow Studio. I'm here with the Wookiee. We're going to continue our lambasting of the founder of the Christian religion. That would be Paul, not Jesus. Jesus never existed. So it would be pretty hard for him to be the founder of much of anything. And you heard that correctly. Paul made Jesus up. As I have shared so many times previously, Christians are fooled into believing that the revelation that comprises their New Testament starts with the Gospel of Matthew, who was a disciple. And then it is followed by the Gospels of Mark, Luke, and John, and then the Acts of the Apostles, and then followed by explanatory letters that explain the life of said Jesus Christ, who, by the way, is never mentioned in any of the preceding texts. And Paul's letters, that's not exactly close. You see, the Gospel of Matthew was written by an impostor. We have no idea who he may have been. It was first penned around 95 to 100 CE, at least 3 generations, some 60 years after the fact. And that the individual who wrote it had nothing to do with the events that had taken place 6 decades previously. It's entirely plagiarized. In fact, it's not even a very good job of plagiarism. Some 70 to 80% of the book of Matthew was plagiarized from Mark and Luke. And the 20% that wasn't plagiarized from Mark and Luke was stolen from the Ebonim, who were Hebrew speakers who wrote what was actually said during the Sermon on the Mount and the Olivet Discourse down when it was the real Messiah and Son of God, David, who gave those speeches. So that's a major swing and a miss if you think that Matthew is the first book of your Bible. The second, Mark and Luke, were both apostles of Paul. Neither were apostles or disciples of said Jesus. A name, by the way, as I said, that did not exist. There was no person named Jesus or a Mr. Christ in first century Judea. The first time that the name Jesus was actually written or spoken was in 1629 in the 3rd edition of the King Iam's, then James, Bible. So not much of a history on your man who was proclaimed to be a god. Both of those hearsay books written by Paul's apostles conveying Paul's gospel message. The concept of a gospel was actually conceived by Paul. It's from euangelion. It's a word that Paul coined for the purpose, saying that it was only his gospel that was acceptable. And they wrote the gospel according to Paul, with Luke mostly copying Mark, but then adding some Odysseus and some of the Sibian oracles and other flavor from pagan lore to complete his book. They were scribed in Rome sometime after 75 CE, 10 years after Paul's death. And you see, the reason that Paul never once quotes this gospel Jesus figure is because there was no gospel Jesus when Paul wrote his letters. Gospel Jesus didn't come to exist until Paul's apostles, Mark and Luke, conceived him 10 years after Paul's demise. That, of course, destroys the entire myth of Christianity, because a man cannot have been chosen to speak for another man when that man didn't yet exist. So this is the truth. The fact of the matter is that the first book written of the Christian New Testament is Galatians. It is an absolute piece of trash. It compares to the Quran in terms of dunderheadedness. The best book that Paul wrote was Romans, and we're in the process of tearing it apart because Paul committed all manner of rational fallacies in conceiving it. It was, again, and expose and dunderheadedness. But all of Paul's letters, 14 of them, preceded the next book of the Christian New Testament by at least a decade, closer to 15 years. So Paul is the inventor of Jesus. He is the inventor of the Christian religion. You can scream, kick, and holler all you want and protest otherwise, but I'm telling you the facts, and those facts are evidentially and rationally indisputable. So now that we know who we're dealing with, and Paul, by the way, admitted in the second letter he wrote to Corinth that he was demon-possessed by a messenger of Satan, which isn't good if you are a Christian. He, in his preeminent thesis, his letter to the Roman occupiers of Judea, while he was in Rome, wrote, "So then, I died." Oh, poor Paul. I don't know. How's he writing this if he died? I don't know. But anyway, he says, "Then I died when I was found in me the commandment with reference to living. This brought death." Romans 7:10. That is a literal rendering of the words as they are scribed in parchment. I believe it's 45. That's the oldest extant reference to Paul's letters, dating to sometime in the 2nd century CE. And so if it's not right, you got no hope of anything being right in Christianity. And this is exactly how it reads. "So then, I died. I ceased to exist. When was found in me the commandment, the regulation, the prescribed precept with reference to living. This brought death." Romans 7:10. We went over that passage in our last program, but let me just get to the essence of it. There are no commandments. The 10 statements that are called the 10 commandments are comprised of 3 statements pursuant to our relationship with God. They are, the first of them says that God's name is Yahowah, that he is a liberator, and that we will not continue to exist if we make up other gods and present them in his presence. The second statement is very long, and it tells us do not be religious. Don't be associated with religious symbols, icons, like Stars of David, which have nothing to do with David, dead gods on a stick, crosses, anything that has to do with a graven image, anything that has to do with religion, anything that has to do with a societal control mechanism in this regard, presenting information about a God that isn't derived directly from the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, don't do. It says that fathers corrupt their sons to the 3rd and 4th generation as a result of this, and because of the widespread corruption and influence of religion, that there will be thousands that will receive the benefits of the covenant by being observant of its terms and conditions. 1,000 among thousands amongst billions is 1 in a million. And the third statement says that it is an unforgivable crime to negate the value of Yahweh's name, to misrepresent Yahweh's name, which is what Paul did in his letters, and it's pervasive throughout the Christian New Testament. It's what's happened in the Talmud. And of course, it's current also in the Quran, which would make all 3 so-called Abrahamic religions unforgivable. That there is no possibility of salvation for anyone who adheres to the message of the Christian New Testament, the Judaism's Talmud, or Islam's Quran, because they all negate the value of Yahweh's name. That's the first 3 statements that are on the first of the 2 tablets. There are 7 instructions on the second tablet, and they speak of the importance of the promise of 7 and the 7th day of our recognition of the importance of our mother and father and our well-being, but that mother and father are not our earthly parents, nor are they our heavenly father, because there is no spiritual mother. It's a very complicated thing that is actually presented throughout the Torah and prophets, something that we're just now beginning to explore as to who Yahowah has positioned throughout time to be the mother and father of the covenant. But that's a whole story in and of itself, which we're just beginning to understand. It says, do not commit adultery. Do not make a habit of committing adultery. Adultery is not having more than one sexual partner, because almost everyone in God's story had multiple wives, and many had multiple sexual relations outside of marriage. So it has nothing to do with the adultery as it is prescribed today, but instead a instruction to say that we should not cheat on God by being religious. And it goes on to talk about not making a habit of killing, of stealing, of bearing false witness, and of coveting. And there is no commandment among any of them. They're all presented in the imperfect conjugation, which means that the moment we stop doing any of these behaviors, we're no longer guilty of the offense, which is highly advantageous for us. So it's don't make a habit of murder. Don't make a habit of an ongoing practice of bearing false witness. The fact of the matter is, however, as Paul was referencing here, that there was a commandment with reference to living. Zo is the Greek word that he used. There is no such thing. First, there's no commandments. And second of all, there's none that reference living. None. It means that his point here is based on what's called a straw man in debate parlance. It's a rational fallacy. You create an artificial construct to attack. And that's what he's doing here. And as a man who was brought up as a rabbinical student, he would have known that there was no reference to a commandment regarding living, which means that this was deliberate fraud. He was deliberately lying to his audience. And he got by with it because he was writing to whom? Romans. How much do you think the Romans knew anything about the Torah?
No, but they understood gratia.
They did understand gratia. The gospel of grace would have appealed to them, because the graces were those cute little naked girls that like to party and have sexual affairs with all manner of wealthy men. So they would have known all about the gratia and Paul's gospel of grace. They would have known that. Did they know the Torah? Of course not. So he was writing to people who he knew were completely ignorant of the subject that he was speaking, which means he was in a position to lie to them without their awareness. But you shouldn't be stupid today. You should take the time to recognize that Paul lied. This is his premium letter. This is his number one letter. This is the one that he wrote to his overlords. He claimed to be a Roman. This was written to the Romans. This was an ode to Rome. And he is overtly lying and committing a rational fallacy. So he is also saying, beyond the straw man, that he died. Well, all evidence to the contrary, he couldn't have finished his letter if he died. He couldn't have even started this letter if he had died. He wasn't dead. He said, well, he died symbolically. What does that mean? He died symbolically.
If you can't baffle them with brilliance.
Baffle them with the BS?
Exactly. Dazzle them with your brilliance. Baffle with BS.
He didn't die. So he's lying. He's lying. He didn't die. And he's saying that it was the Torah's commandment on living that caused him to die. So if we were to play along with him, when God, with his own, in his own accord, with his own finger, I mean, God doesn't have a finger, but nonetheless, he etched in stone these 2 tablets. And on these tablets that he wrote himself for us to have, actually wrote them twice because Moshe
broke the first one.
Broke the first set. But the second set still exists. It happens to be inside the Ark of the Covenant. And within a matter of years, that Ark of the Covenant is going to be brought out of its secure location, and those 2 tablets are going to be held up for all to see. We'll get the chance to see God's penmanship. I'm hoping that he actually wrote in the earliest Paleo-Hebrew script so that the instructions are discernible even to those who aren't literate. And what I mean by that is that earliest Hebrew script is a pictographic script where the letters almost all depict either human qualities or things that humans would use in their daily lives. And therefore, you could come to understand the first letter, Aleph, is both a ram and a bull. The Bayeth is a home. So the letters all depicted things that we can relate to. The Yod is a hand, an open hand reaching down and out to us. A Kaf would be a palm, and Ain would be an eye. So all of these letters had definite meaning to us in the way they were drawn. And when we see them, we are going to know, yes, Paul lied. Now, you don't have to do that. Wait for that, because of the Dead Sea Scrolls. These statements that Yahowah etched in stone are not only presented in Shemoth, the book now known as Exodus. It actually means names. That should be your first clue, Sherlock, that there's a name in there that's really, really important for you to know, like Yahowah, the name that is erased from the Christian New Testament, proving that it didn't come from Yahowah. I'm just trying to be reasonable with you now, folks, helping you think this one through. Now, in that, these 10 statements are presented there. They're also represented in the book of Verbatim. So both places you can look, and we have the Dead Sea Scrolls collections covering both of them, dating back 300 years before the events played out in 33 CE, and literally 5 centuries before the Christian New Testament was codified. And there is no commandment with reference to living. And oh, by the way, the commandments are the 10 statements that were etched in stone, say nothing about killing anyone other than the one that says you should not make a practice of killing. So if you want to know about what it says about dying, which is what Paul claimed it did, it says don't do that. So you can't claim it killed you when the only statement regarding death says don't do that. I mean, why? I mean, I had a good friend of mine, one of my very, very closest friends, was speaking at the program we did yesterday and said, this is such a comprehensive refutation and inarguable refutation against Christianity. And it's so easy to do. Why haven't there been millions of people who have done this previously? There's been a lot of rational, smart people that could read, write, that were articulate, that understood the rules of logic, that could have done exactly what I'm doing. Why haven't they? Are they just afraid?
They're afraid. Absolutely. Thomas Jefferson's a great example. He understood enough to know this was all bullshit. But he was afraid to publish what he wrote.
Yeah, Thomas Jefferson had a equivalent to an adopted son. And many of his letters were to this younger man. And he was trying to share wisdom with him. And he wrote in one of his letters that Paul was the first person to corrupt the message of said character, Jesus. And what he recognized is that what Paul wrote and what is attributed now to gospel Jesus are completely incompatible. And that's true. It is completely incompatible. But what he wrote subsequently is even more interesting, because what he did is he thought that the message that was attributed to this character Jesus was interesting, and that Paul's was totally corruptive. So he had his version of the New Testament that had only some of the sayings without any of the miracles of this character now known as Jesus. He didn't have the materials that we have available to us to demonstrate that Jesus never existed. I'm certain that if Jefferson had put his mind to it, had the same tools that I have to work with, and prioritized coming to know who Yahowah is and what he had to say, that he would have beat me to all of these conclusions by 200 years. But he had other interests and didn't pursue this to that extent. But he wrote to his this young man that he had sent the letter to, says, "Don't under any circumstance share what I'm giving to you with anyone." That drives to your point. Do not do that. It says, because if you were to share this, or it were to get out that I have made these conclusions, even though I am certain of them, that they would run me out of town and kill me. So even in the Americas, where there was supposed to be separation of church and state, Jefferson knew that the truth was deadly. And maybe that's the reason why there have been so few people that dared accuse the Christian New Testament, and particularly Paul, of being a scandalous defrauder and liar. Is that for most of the time, it was a death sentence. They would not only kill you, they would torture you. They would defame you, kill you for telling the truth, because, well, the lie has been very, very profitable to a lot of people. But it still is astounding that today there would be influencers like a Charlie Kirk integrating his religion, his Jesus religion, when there was no such person as a Jesus, when Paul is obviously telling lies, and support for a rapist, pedophile president that's literally the embodiment of Satan. And they have these
so much for
services.
The moral majority.
Oh yeah, church services with their little crosses, honoring this man who was an influencer on behalf of the integration of the MAGA pedophile loving false Messiah Trump with their precious Jesus. That's how just revolting we are. And he was supposed to be a smart Christian. What about the dumb ones?
Well, they're controlling the dumb ones. The other guys are in it for the financial benefit and the power.
That is true. There's no question that's true. So anyway, this whole statement is insane. So then I died. No, he didn't. When was found in me the commandment with reference to living. There is no such thing. And the 10 statements actually say you shall not kill, as opposed to you're dead. This brought death. Romans 7:10 is an absolute piece of trash. For indeed, Gar, this evil sin. So he is calling Yahowah's 10 statements sin. He's calling what God etched in his own hand deadly. So here is a man who is admitting that he's a sexual pervert, which he did in this diatribe, who is guilty of violating every rational fallacy, at least all of the major ones, and who has made up an imaginary man God, an Iousu Christou, that is positioning himself as the lone spokesperson for this imaginary God, claiming that the actual God, who he will use to justify the creation of his pretend God, is evil. That's what he's saying here. What God wrote is evil. If what God wrote for us to follow and learn from, to conduct our lives around, is evil, then he's evil. That's what he's saying. Yeah, you don't like it, I'm, tough. For indeed, this evil took hold of this opportunity. Well, the opportunity what? He says he was dead. What opportunity is that? There's nothing. Hey, you're dead, man, you're dead. There is no opportunity once you're dead. Okay, let's say that Paul wasn't really very good at storytelling. that maybe it took advantage of the opportunity before he was dead. But what opportunity was there? We're talking about the 10 statements that Yahowah etched in stone, and he's saying that this evil sin of these commandments took the opportunity through the commandment to thoroughly deceive and to completely beguile me. And so through it, it killed. No, I'm just here to tell you, I know God pretty well. We have a great working relationship. I treat him as my dad. He treats me as a son. As I say, we have a great working relationship. We've been working together side by side now for 24 and a half years. I've written 35 books that include my own amplified translations of his testimony from the oldest extant sources, which would be the Dead Sea Scrolls. I've written 25,000 pages of those translations and analysis of them, and deduced tens of thousands of previously unheralded insights from them. I know him pretty well. In fact, I would go out on a limb and say, I know Yahowah better than anyone in the last 2,500 years, and maybe better than anyone for a lot longer than that. I'm in a pretty good position to tell you God's response to this kind of stuff. And when somebody claims, as Paul did, to speak for him, and then says this kind of rubbish, that they're not going to get an express ticket to hell. Paul is not yet in Sheol. And the reason for that is that Paul is going to be berated by me and the Son of God, Dode, prior to that, and he is going to endure 7 times recompense for all of the harm that he caused billions of people, not only robbing them of their souls, but for creating a religion that dehumanized and demonized Jews, because he blamed Jews for being the enemies of his new religion and for killing his God. And so the consequence of that is going to deserve 7 times retribution before his sorry soul gets locked up in Sheol. So I'm going to read what he wrote again. And as I do it, I tell you, it turns my stomach. And the very fact, again, that this is the centerpiece of Paul's 14 letters, Romans, right in the heart of Romans. And that's the heart of the Christian New Testament. It's very inception. It's founder. And it says such nonsense. It tells me that people are genuinely stupid. That's just the bottom line. To believe that there was a Jesus Christ and that he is your Savior and that Paul spoke for him and that the New Testament came from God and that there are prophecies regarding the imaginary Jesus Christ in the Torah and prophets, you have to be ignorant, irrational, and grotesquely immoral. And the word for that is stupid. For indeed, this evil sin, took hold of this opportunity through the commandment, through the very statement that he is attributing to the God he claims he's speaking on behalf of, through the commandment, to thoroughly deceive and to completely beguile me. It's called projection. When you're a piece of crap, like, for example, the President of the United States, and you are a sexual pervert and egomaniacal warmonger, what you do is you blame everybody else for who you are. When you get caught red-handed in the Epstein files, you say, I don't know Epstein, but boy, that Bill Clinton, man, he is all over the Epstein files. You project. You said, well, there's that slimy author that's associated with the far left, and they created this plot long ago with Epstein, and it's all their fault. These files aren't real. They're just a leftist plot.
Aren't they the same people that are praising their religion?
Yeah. Maduro, he was a con man and a thief and a drug smuggler, when Trump is the pirate and murderer and drug smuggler and the con man. It's projection. What you're doing here is Paul is a beguiling, deceiving piece of trash who is deluding unscrupulously and methodically cheating everyone who has a Bible and thinks that the New Testament is godly and inspired. He has deceived you. He has beguiled you. He has enticed you. He has deluded you. He has methodically cheated you of your soul. And yet he's ascribing all of that to the God he says authorized him to be the lone apostle to the world. Rationally, just trying to keep it simple for you. There is what's called a 0% possibility that Paul told the truth when he said that this God who he is just now saying that in his 10 statements that he etched in stone, that he took an opportunity to thoroughly deceive and completely beguile Paul. That same God chose Paul to demean him and slander him in this way. Now, that is an absolute impossibility. The God who wrote the 10 statements could not have been the spirit that asked Paul to attribute deception and beguiling enticements and delusions, unscrupulous cheating on the statements that he wrote. It's an impossibility. You cannot, there is no set of circumstances where that's possible. That Paul could have been appointed as the exclusive witness to the world on behalf of the God who Paul is calling unscrupulous, systematically enticing, methodically cheating, and killing him. You don't really need any more evidence than that. Just that alone, if you are an informed, rational person, means you can no longer be a Christian. And to promote your myth of your Jesus Christ and your Holy Bible and your Scripture says and your New Testament, after knowing that, means that you are discarding evidence and reason for faith. I'll read it again from beginning to end without commentary, although it's hard to do because every statement, every part of it's untrue. For indeed, this evil sin took hold of this opportunity through the commandment to thoroughly deceive and completely beguile me. And so through it, it killed me.
Me.
Lie.
Yeah. The psychopathic narcissist.
He is a
paranoid, whatever everybody else is thinking about him.
The medical term is confabulation. It's what I call Donald Trump. Confabulation is the condition when there's a limited, if tenuous, connection between what a person believes and says and reality. So with Donald Trump, as it was with Paul, there is a very thin connection, sometimes non-existent connection between what they say and reality. called confabulation. Donald Trump is a confabulator. Most of what comes out of his mouth is, in fact, untrue. Now, he may believe it to be true. It doesn't change the fact that he's lying. It's called confabulation. Paul, of course, did not believe any of this. Paul is just flat out pulling off a fraud. He was demon possessed. He was speaking for Satan. He was pulling off a fraud. Donald Trump is also demon possessed. He is the person that the prophets have spoken of that would be the whore of Babylon, the great betrayer. He is the man whose ego and sexual perversions and his bombastic, deadly diatribes are going to bring the world to its knees. His goal is to be the dictator of the world. He is the person that Christians have been trying to ascertain as the Antichrist. He's it. And as I have said, and I made this point emphatic at least 15 years ago, that when we finally determine who that individual is, and now I determined that over a year ago, and have written a book proving it called Time of Trouble. It's volume 9 of the Yahowah series, free at yahowah.com if you want to check my evidence and rationale as I demonstrate that this is conclusive, that Donald Trump is the great betrayer, that he is the Satan incarnate, that he is literally demon possessed. Go to yahowah.com, 9th volume of the Yahowah series, Time of Trouble, and you will find proof of that. But what I said long ago, before I wrote that volume, is that when this individual appears, Christians will flock to him. They will look at him as being a Messiah figure. They will view him as the second coming of the non-coming of Jesus Christ. And that's exactly how they perceive Trump. MAGA Christians are devoted to this man. They worship this man. And so what we're witnessing among MAGA Christians today in their praise of the sexual pervert and deadly demagogue that is Donald Trump is exactly what Paul sought to achieve. And it is exactly as I had said, that there will be a very little difference between these two men. And that if you want to understand the persona and the strategy of the person who appears as the Antichrist, as this living embodiment of the adversary, just look at Paul's words and deeds. He will be a spitting image of Paul. And we know this because Paul, like Muhammad, was admittedly demon possessed. And this is the consequence. And both of them integrated politics and religion. Both of them were exceedingly deadly. Both of them promoted themselves. There really is very little difference between Paul and Muhammad and Donald Trump. There is a point to all of this. Not only can we absolutely and irrefutably disprove the credibility of the Christian New Testament, but we can also give you a window from which you can understand the very motivations and the consequence of Donald Trump as he impersonates Paul and Muhammad. So, proving that he was wholly beguiling and completely delusional, the unscrupulous and illogical one, after systematically attacking the purportedly enslaving and murderous Towrah and its supposedly evil and deadly commandment, he wrote, "So, as a result, this affirms that the Towrah is holy, and also the commandment is worthy of veneration, also good." What I've just said is evil, corrupting, and what he said killed him. That it was God's way of being disingenuous and deceitful towards him. He says, in this way, the Torah is sacred. It's holy. And also the commandment is worthy of veneration. So he's saying that it deceived him, it killed him. All right. So he's had two statements that said it was the commandment that deceived him and the commandment that killed him. And in this way, as a result, this affirms that the commandment and the Torah from which it came are worthy of veneration and good. What he's saying is, what's worthy of veneration and good is deception and death. Now, who would you think would be an advocate of deception and death?
Oh, let me think. Could
Satan.
it be Satan?
Satan is an advocate of deception and death. So after saying that it's the Torah that deceived him and killed him, he's saying that the Torah and its commandments should be venerated because that's good. Deception and death. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't bad, bad, bad. Oh, good, good. No, it's bad is good. That is what he's saying here. He's not saying the Torah is good. He's saying in this way, when it can be perceived that the Torah is deadly and deceptive, that's worthy of veneration. Romans 7. Now that's the entirety of it. We've gone through 1 through 12.
13.
Now, the other reason he says that, it's the same reason that you read things in the Quran where there are 20 things in a row that are just devastatingly evil, untrue, ridiculous, absurd. And then there will be a statement that says, oh, and Allah is merciful. Go kill for Allah, murder for Allah, women have no rights. Terror is good, stealing is lawful and good, and Allah is merciful. And so the idiot can say, no, Allah's not a terrorist, even though he claims to be a terrorist. Allah's not deadly, even though he claims that he is deadly. Allah's not sadistic, even though he spends all of his time in hell torturing people throughout the Quran. Muhammad's not a bad guy, even though it's shown that he was a rapist and a pedophile and a mass murdering thug that was involved in human trafficking, because Allah's kind and forgiving. So you throw the last line in, and you've just had 11 statements that trash the Torah and its 10 statements, and then you throw the last line in so that people can say, well, he wasn't anti-Torah. He just said the Torah is worthy of veneration. So there you go. Nah.
Context. Please.
It is how you fool fools. Paul was stupid, but the people he wrote to and who believe him are obviously stupider still. Oh, if nothing else, by praising what he has invested the previous 11 statements destroying, the religious can now assert with reckless abandon that Paul actually supports the Torah. If that is not enough to make your head spin and your stomach queasy, Paul, after contradicting God, is now contradicting himself. But no, what he's doing is I had 11 statements that trash God, that trash the Torah, and that trash the 10 statements he etched in stone, calling them deceptive and deadly. And he even called them imprisoning, that they were controlling to the point of depriving people of free will, the woman in this case. So the Torah is controlling, it lords over people, it deprives them of their free will, it deceives them, it beguiles them, and it kills them. And then he says the Torah is worth of veneration in this way. So what he's really saying is, so long as we can misconstrue the Torah as deadly and controlling and deceitful, then let's venerate that. Sadly, as I said, this all reminds me of the Quran, where Allah tells you that there should be no compulsion in religion. So they, Muslims say, hey, no compulsion in religion. So, everything you say about submit or die, that's wrong because Allah says there's no compulsion in religion. Well, the next breath, he orders Muslims to kill all non-Muslims, in addition to any Muslim who rejects the Islamic religion. That kind of contradiction manages to fool the foolish. But perhaps even in the swirling tornadic winds of circular reasoning, there is an explanation for Paul's conclusion, whereby he negated his own ridiculous rant. Maybe it was good from his perspective that the Torah killed him. That way he could present himself as rising from the dead, just like his resurrected man God, so that he now serves as the Savior, especially now that the Torah had schooled him in all manner of unscrupulous methods of beguiling and deceit. And of the latter, he was now Lord and Master. Well, there has always been an unspoken and a noble aspect of Christianity that Romans 7 seems to foster. The old God, the God of the old system died, which is why his witness was relegated to an Old Testament, and why his words are no longer considered relevant. Laying the foundation for this myth, Paul has the husband in this metaphor that began 2 programs ago, maybe 3, who is a metaphor for Yahowah, applies to himself in relation to both Israel and the covenant. Therefore, Israel dies, the covenant dies. Thereby, it frees believers from the deceased deity. So they have now an opportunity to have a new God. But men kill him. Can't be much of a God, is he? Oh, well, nonetheless, let's not get into the details. Well, wait a minute. That's the whole crux of the religion, that God was a man, not much of a God, and that men killed God. But Paul said that those dastardly Jews, they killed his God. Should that have been the case, you ought to be worshiping the Jews. Christians will, of course, deny that their religion killed God, but they will admit that their religious killed their God. But there is no denying that they treat God as if he were dead. From the Christian perspective, Yahowah was replaced by Jesus Christ, a man they also claim was killed by men, Jews no less. And in the process, a real and rewarding relationship with God devolved into swimming in the cesspool of one man's perverted imagination. All right. That was fun, wasn't it?
It's so ridiculous.
It's so easily disproved.
I know.
It's so obviously false. I mean, there is nothing there to hold your hat onto. There's nothing to say, oh, well, I can find something good in that. No, there's nothing. I mean, it's like searching a cesspool for turds and saying, I'm going to find one that doesn't stink.
All polished up.
No. Okay. So when we were last in Galatians, which was the founding book, this is the cornerstone of the Christian New Testament, we found Paulos. By the way, now he has changed his name because he has admitted, and Yahowah knows, that his actual name is Shaul, because Yahowah, 666 years prior to Paul, now Shaul, writing his first letter, called Shaul up by name and said he was the plague of death. So anyway, he wants you to believe that he is now Apollos because, well, it sounds similar to Apollos, I assume. Paulos, an apostle. Now, I don't know how one claims that you're an apostle. Is there any place in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms that speaks of an apostle? No. So how can you claim that you're speaking for God and call yourself an apostle as if this was an appointed title from God when there is no reference anywhere to an apostle in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms?
He made it up.
Oh, that's true. He made it up. Like his name.
Exactly.
Paulos, an apostle, not from men, not even by the means of man, which is an absolute lie. He was equipped to do this job because he was trained as a rabbi. But, you know, it's like Donald Trump. He's only lying when his fingers move the quill or his mouth opens. All other times, he not lying. He's thinking about lying.
He's going
to only
lie.
lying when he's writing, texting. In the case of the Donald, or opening his mouth. So Apollos, an apostle, not that term should mean anything to anybody, not from men. That's a absolute lie. He was trained as a rabbi. Not even by the means of man, he was religious. So that's not true either. But contrary, on behalf of Iousu Christou. Well, there was no Iousu Christou in the first century, so he could not have been speaking for Iousu Christou. None. There was nobody by anywhere close to that name in the first century Judea. No, not even a hint of somebody by that name. There is no evidence that anybody by that name ever existed in Judea. So he could not have been on behalf of an Iousu Christou. Impossible. And Iousu is not a Hebrew name, which means he could not have been someone that was foretold in the Torah and prophets. Christou is not a Hebrew name either. There are no Hebrew names where you have a first name followed by a last name. That is not the Hebrew style. The Hebrew style is like Yosha ben Nun, Moshe's successor. He was Yosha, Yahweh saves, son of Nun, the infinite one. So there is no naming convention like this. Then you want to say, well, Christou is a title, then it should have gone before the Iousu. It'd be Christou, Iousu. But Iousu is not a Hebrew name, and Christou is not a Hebrew title. Matter of fact, Christou is from Christos, which is the application of drugs. And so if you're speaking of somebody that was previously called out, then you'd have to use one of the terms that Yahowah used to speak of those who would convey his message. And there's Bashar, herald. There's Nakar, observant foreigner. There's Choder, stem off the main branch. There is Yada, one who knows. There are lots of titles that God has used to describe those that are one who would speak for him. And apostolos, not one of them. And there is no mention anywhere. I've said this a bunch of times. $1 billion. If you can find someplace in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms where there is a prediction of an arriving Iousu Christou. Because there is no mention anywhere in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms of an Iousu, Iousus, or Iousun, of a Christos, Christou, or Christoon. None, anywhere. And all the prophecies that are ascribed to him were stolen from Dod. And they speak of Dod, who is actually the Son of God and the Messiah and the returning King and our Savior. So this is not just an imaginary story. It's, like the story of the Iliad and the Odyssey. It's a clever story about, paganism and all of this sort of thing, and men off fighting wars, the Greeks and the Trojans, and then coming back and sailing the stormy seas of pagan religious lore. You can tell that story. It's a lovely story, and it was well written. Homer, became famous for his story. And he used all the Greek gods and goddesses of the day to make his story seem real, and integrated parts of his story with actually two civilizations that did fight a battle with one another. But in this case, he just made up all of this. I mean, just as there may have been somebody named Odysseus, there was no one named Iousu. Odysseus was at least a Greek name. Iousu is not a Hebrew name. Christou is not a Hebrew title. There was no such person. And then he says, and the God. And the God. Doesn't know his name. If you don't know and use Yahweh's name, you do not know him, you do not speak for him. Father of the one having roused and awakened him out of a lifeless corpse. So I guess Paul wasn't the only one that was killed. Iusu Christou, of the God, of the Father. He was aroused out of a lifeless corpse. Now, why would you do that? What is the purpose of having a bodily resurrection? I mean, I'm fairly familiar with the story of Passover. Does the lamb ever come back and say, hey, I'm back? No. What does the Torah say about the Passover lamb after it's fulfilled the purpose of Passover, which is to provide a lovely meal for the people?
Burn up the leftovers.
You incinerate the leftovers, so there can be no bodily resurrection. In fact, the Passover lamb is killed as a symbol of providing life for those that are nourished by it. Correct?
Yep.
Its purpose is to give life, not to come back to life. So there is a 0% possibility that the God of the Father raised an imaginary person with a Greek name and a Greek title who never existed from out of a lifeless corpse, because myths don't have corpses and it doesn't fit anything that he said. Complete and utter fabrication. And these were his first words. This is Galatians 1:1. This is the opening crescendo of the most popular religion in the world, and every word of that is a lie. Every single word. And all of the brothers. Now, what brothers? He doesn't have any brothers. First of all, he has no brothers. And symbolically, he's a Jew. And the Jews all rejected him because they knew he was lying. So he can't be talking to the brothers. And who is he talking to? The Greeks? They're not his brothers. Is he talking to the Romans? He's writing this letter to Galatia. No Romans up there, and he's a Roman citizen because his daddy's situation. But he's got no brothers. I mean, it makes it sound like, I got a friend in my pocket, and so I'm not lonely. Like Harvey the Rabbit to the brothers. There were no brothers. When Paul will say early in this letter that, what's wrong with you? You all just stupid? When I was there, you believed me, and then the moment I left, you turned on me and disregarded everything I had to say. Are you that stupid? So who's he talking about brothers? He's writing the Galatians, who in just a matter of a sentence or two, he's going to say, you're stupid, you're ignorant, you're dummies for rejecting me. So don't buy into it. There were no brothers with me. He's got no brothers with him. He doesn't have a brother. To the called out, to the ecclesia. And ecclesia has been changed to church. How do you get church out of ecclesia? Do you know what the words ek and ecclesia mean in Greek? Ek means out. And a ecclesia is to call.
Like Kara?
So is to call out.
Yeah.
So it's been changed from, you have two options. And in translating, I've been doing it now for 24 years. I'm fairly familiar with the craft. And when you see a word in another language, if it is a name or a title or a word, you are locked into a very strict protocol. If it is a word, you must render its meaning in the other language. So, for example, if you are rendering ecclesia, you cannot replace it by church. It says that you're violating the rules of translation. If it's just a word, you would have to replace it by what the word says, called out. Now, if it is a title, your responsibility is to replicate the sound of that title. It's called transliteration in the other language, while conveying its meaning. So it would say, to the ecclesia, which means called out. That would be the way that you would handle it if it's a title. If it's a name, you strictly say, of the ecclesia, and you leave it at that. And your notes, you can say, by the way, ecclesia is from ek and ecclesia. It means out and called. But to replace it with church is disingenuous. It's fraud. Now, church, the closest thing to it didn't exist. There was nothing close to it in Greek. So it stayed as ecclesia while the text was Greek. It only changed during the time that it was being popularized by the Roman Catholic Church. And at that time, they were trying to impose the religion on the shattering Roman Empire. And the most influential people in it at that time were the barbarians, particularly their Germanic tribes. And the Germanic tribes had a very popular goddess that was known throughout the Roman Empire. Her name was Church. From church, we get the English word circuit, church, circle, and circuit. So all of those things come from, and circus. Circus. All of those things come from church. She was the daughter of Helios, who was the pagan god of the sun and the Germanic religion. That's the origins of church. So if you have a church, you are the daughter of the sun god of the Germanic pagan religion. Congratulations.
Well, when you're recruiting pagans, a little familiarity sells.
Always helps. So you need to know that the word isn't church. It was changed to church. And by changing to church, all they did was amalgamize the pagan religion of the day into your scriptures. Of the ecclesia, of the Galatians. That's Galatians 1:2. Grace, it was the Greece, that's the translation. The actual name is cherish. Cherish are the charities. They are the three very happy, very party hardy, naked, three young women who were into sexual promiscuity and parties and carousing, and they do all sorts of nefarious little things. So he is now introducing himself under the gratia or the charis, which are the charities of the pagan Greek and Roman religion, and not just ordinary goddesses. These are fornicators here. You're a little happy party on, sexually attractive naked girls. Grace, cherish to you. When Yahowah says that when identifying a false prophet, he says they speak in the name of other gods. Guilty. They don't speak in my name. Guilty. They are not appointed by me. In other words, you won't find a reference to their title in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. Guilty. They say things that are contrary to my message. Guilty. They make predictions of the future that don't come true. Paul only had one prophecy. It was about his rapture, and he missed it by just 2,000 years. Well, plus the fact he had the wrong day of the year. He had his on trumpets, Towrah, as opposed to Shabuah, and he was off on the timing by, well, he said it was going to happen in his lifetime, would have to be by 66, and it's going to happen in 2033. Yeah, so it's not quite 2,000 years. Grace to you and peace, Irene, not shalom. He could have said shalom because most everybody would have known it. It was the most common word in Hebrew. and known throughout the region, just as shalom is known throughout the world today. And it would mean reconciliation, but no, he used the Greek irene, peace. From theos, so he says, I'm speaking on behalf of God. Now, God doesn't say irene. He says shalom, and he knows what it means. And he doesn't convey through people who do not know his name. And this is theos again. God, Father of us? No. He is not the God of you. He is not the Father of you. He has not only, I can't say actually disowned you, because he never owned you. He didn't reject you because he never had you. But on the list of those that God finds the most appalling in all of human history, the top of that list is the one man that he called out by name to say is the plague of death. So rather than being the Son of God, with God being the Father of us, Shaul, Paul, is the one person that God goes out of his way to condemn by name, saying that he is the plague of death.
You think that's why he might have changed his name?
You think maybe that is why he changed his name. But yet Paul was just like everything that Satan does. Satan is so convinced that people are stupid, and he's typically proven right. I mean, if you read Islam, it's so obvious that Allah is Satan, spends all of his time tormenting people in hell, and he is completely dishonest. It's obvious that Allah is Satan. And it's just like, I'm going to put it right out there. I'm going to even admit that my prophet is not a prophet, and that I'm going to say is not a prophet. And I'm going to admit that I spend all of my time in hell and that he's demon possessed. And just like in the New Testament, Paul admits that he is controlled by a messenger from Satan. And so this is Satan saying, people are so damn stupid that I'm going to tell them exactly who I am. And I'm going to tell you how I'm using this piece of crap. And they won't care. They won't figure it out. The majority of people will believe that I'm God, and they will pray to and worship and bow down to me as the God Jesus Christ.
Well, that's the one thing he got right.
He got that right.
People are stupid.
People are stupid. That's just the fact of the matter. So he is playing people for fools here. So you and peace from God, Father of us, and Lord, Iesu Christou. Lord is not a title that God likes applied to himself. Sometimes it's an honorary title. It means sir, but it's not a title that he likes applied to himself. And Iesu and Christou never existed. Again, he's got the title after the name. Now that would be in what was sometimes used, at least with Julius Caesar, it was that way. So what he's playing off is the popularity of Julius Caesar with Iesus Christus. But most of the others, it was Caesar, Augustus, for example. They got the title in front of the name. It's the Shah of Iran. It's Pharaoh Tutmosis of the Exodus, for example. Titles typically go before names. Masiach as a title would go before the name. It's the Masiach Dot, for example. So he has them reversed, but he has them reversed for a purpose, because very people at this time were particularly aware of a man who was positioned post-mortem as a god. I mean, Julius Caesar was an arrogant, deadly piece of trash, but a clever warrior. And after his death, and the whole story on how the Ides of March became so synonymous with the festivals of the Roman Empire, later became the basis of Easter week for Roman Catholicism. And Julius Caesar is kind of retroactively looked at as a man god, which is why Augustus then declares that he is both Pope and God. So he's playing off the popularity and the post-mortem deification of Julius Caesar. And so it's Iusus Christus. And it was Julius Caesar was Iusus Caesar. So that's the reason why it's inverted like this. But again, there was no person named Iusu and no title Christu in first century Judea. Given himself on account of the sins of us. The purpose of the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim is not to give the Messiah, who happens to be Dode, the very Son of God and our Savior, on behalf of the sins of us. Sin is a religious word. It really has no basis in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. I was a really wonderful young man, a very, very good friend of one of the most devoted covenant members. Jake O'Brien wrote a song, and I'm about me here in the Virgin Islands and the roles that God is using to convey his message through me. And he spoke of the Adam of Perah, which is this bloody red man of the earth who serves as a productive bull, as the metaphor for the fulfillment of Towrah. And he used the word perfect before the Adam of Perah. Maybe because it fit the cadence of what he was doing. And so I start to cringe because of the religious perception of perfect. So I said, I need to do this anyway. So this morning, I'm going to look up and see how God defines tamim, which is, it's the plural of tamam. The verb is tamam. Verbs always in Hebrew define the nouns, and the noun is simply the plural expression of the verb. Tamam doesn't say perfect. There's nothing even remotely akin to perfect in the word. And that's the only word that's ever used in Hebrew that is rendered as perfect, is tamim, from tamam. What it means is finishes the job, completes the mission, is wholly devoted to the cause, right to the end. It's the one thing God's been looking for the past 6,000 years. Ever since Adam gave up on engaging, being observant, being responsive, and being someone who could be relied upon, God has been searching for someone who would just finish the damn job. I mean, it's not that tough. I just want you to see it through. To some extent, Moshe finished Noah finished the ark, got on it. His family were saved from the regional flood there, and the like. And Yahowah has a nice story. He said Noah listened to what he had to say, did what he had asked, and therefore he saved himself and the 8 souls on the ark. And it's a lovely expression of what the covenant represents. And it was to remove them from the fallen, the Nephilim, because man had fallen and didn't know how to get up. So that's why God had the fresh start there. But, the story is, tries to pick it up with Abraham. But, man, he did not see it through. I mean, even after all this that Yahowah did through him, he's still pimping out Sarah for sheepies. And then you look at Yishak and Yaakov. They didn't get it done either. And the children of Israel, they start off bad. It's not that they didn't finish the job. They start off bad. You look at the Exodus when God's removing them from Mitzrayim, and they're a mess even before they get to Nuweiba Beach. The Nuweiba Beach crossing of the Gulf of Aqaba portion of the Red Sea on the land bridge. Even before they get to that, they're saying, let's just go back. We want to be back in Egypt. And they finally get to the other side, and the first thing they do is build a damn golden calf, did start being religious. And then they start giving Moshe lip, and then they give Yahweh lip. They tell Yahweh to shut up and go away. We never want to hear from you or see you again. And Moshe then gave up. He says, these people are impossible. I don't want this damn job. Would you just kill me? That's what you call not seeing it through to the end. Finally, Yahweh said, listen, I'm just going to help make this easier for you. You don't have to get them into the promised land. Just get them to the promised land. I got some guys that'll take it from there. And then Yahweh is all in with Dode. He is anointed. He is my Messiah. I'm calling him my son. I am his father. I'm giving him my spirit. I'm anointing him to do this. I'm positioning him as the king and leader of my people. I'm inspiring him as a prophet. I'm all in with him. And Dode, he gets to 56 years old and he completely loses it. Right now I'm translating the story of Bathsheba, and you want to claw your eyes out. He couldn't get it done. And I get, he got started at 8, and the first job was to go and take down the giant, and he then he gets run all around the lot by Shaul, the harbinger of Sheol, of Shaul to come. And by the time he becomes king, he's marrying in all the wrong places. He's doing all the wrong stuff. And by the time he reaches 56, he just completely loses it. He couldn't get it done. Now, finally, he gets a visitation from a couple of people, an adoptive mother and father, and they say, hey, kid, we're here to tell you who you are and what you need to do, and you need to get your act together and stop wallowing all over yourself now. And we had a really rough talk with him, and he shaped up, and he did complete Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. But what God's saying is just once, can I get somebody to get to the finish line? That's what Tamein means. Yeah, it's will you complete the job? If you want to call that perfect, then I'm here to tell you that I'm going to be as perfect as you're going to see in a long time, because I'm not giving up. I'm going to see this job through, no matter how difficult it continues to be. So anyway, having given himself on account of the sins, and as I told you, that Hebrew has a very different portrayal of what is rendered religiously as sin. Because when you speak of sin, what's the first thing you think of? That you did stuff you shouldn't have done. You were a bad boy. You're a bad boy. You fornicated, or you had dreams of a pretty girl, and or you stole somebody's lunch money, or you told a fib. There is no such thing as a sin in the Hebrew mindset. When God talks about the kind of things that are offensive, he uses ra, which means wrong and evil. He uses chata, which means to misrepresent and to mislead. He uses awon, which means to corrupt and to pervert. He uses pisha, which means to engage in a revolt. All of those concepts are religious in nature. All of them. They are not individual boo-boos. They're all things that the religious do to mislead people and to take them away from God. So this idea, the sins of us, no. God's not interested in the sins of us. He doesn't care that you stole Susie's lunch money. He doesn't give a crap if you told Uncle Rich a lie.
But if you're religious and political and conspiratorial,
and you're leading his people astray,
there's your
or
sin,
you're causing harm against his people because of your malfeasance, your misrepresentation, and it has to be societal misrepresentation. It's the kind of stuff that Paul is doing here, creating a religion that demonizes his people and leads people away from him. So that is the ultimate form of malfeasance that God is opposed, and he can't resolve it. God can solve crimes of omission, where you have been misled and you stop, where you have said things that are untrue, but you stop. But if you're actually aggressively promoting religion and you do it continuously, God can't save you from yourself. So anyway, this continues, the one having given himself on account of the sins of us, we've said that doesn't exist, so that he might possibly gouge or tear out, us from the inflexible and unrelenting circumstances of the old system. He's saying that the purpose of his Iousu Christou was to gouge us out, to tear us out, to rip us away from the Old Testament, which is the sum total of all prophecy, of all testimony from God. Sum total. Matter of fact, the Gabriel, who is mistaken in Christianity to be an angel, but is actually a man. He can't be anything other than a man. He's called a man twice by Daniel, and the name means he's a man. It's from Gabar, which means a courageous man. Gabriel, who is Dode, tells Daniel that when he comes to fulfill the Pesach and Matzah and Bikurim, and he gives the exact date in 33 CE that he's going to personally do this, that will be the end of prophecy. There will be no more. Which means God's not adding to his revelation. He's having me explain it to you, but he's not adding to his revelation. And so you cannot have a Christian New Testament and a Messiah, because the person who is the Messiah said there will be no more revelation. He said it'll bring an end to prophecy.
Oops.
You know, people just don't read, or they just don't think.
Both.
So he says it will bring an end to the gouge us out of, tear us away from, rip us away from that past inflexible and unrelenting circumstances of the old system, because Paul has a very flexible system. It's but what I say today, even if I contradict myself tomorrow, it's but what Paul say, that's exceedingly flexible.
All you got to do is believe.
Yeah, all you got to do is believe. Believe what? Well, I don't know. Did you give us any reason to believe? Well, I lied a lot and committed a lot of rational fallacies, and I never did quote the person I said that I was speaking for. And every time I quoted, said God, I didn't know his name, and I misappropriated what he said and misquoted him 100% of the time. So why would you believe such a person? Are you out of your mind? So the past and flexible, unrelenting circumstances of that old system, that would be the Old Testament. That's Paul's right here in his first letter. He's in his first sentence, and he's trashing the Old Testament, creating the myth of an Old Testament. It didn't exist prior to Paul. That concept does not exist with God. If you're talking about an Old and a New Testament, you're using terminology that does not exist in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms or come from God, which is disadvantageous and harmful trash, indeed pornography.
I want to punch him just for that line.
Oh, God, I want to worse than punch him. In opposition to, and the desire and will of the Theos, God, and the Father of us. He's saying that the Old Testament is in opposition to his God and his Father. And it is, because his God and Father happen to be Satan. But the only way that sentence makes sense is if your God is Satan. That's Galatians 1:4. I'll leave it there. We'll pick up at this point in our next edition of Twistianity here from the Rainbow Studio. It is a delight to be able to share this with you and to show you just how utterly stupid it is to be a Christian. You have to be completely ignorant and irrational to believe any of this. And you're welcome. I'm delighted to be able to help you out in this regard. As I have said many times, I killed Jesus. And you're welcome.
Congratulations.